My name is Liz. Thank you for having me, by the way. And I'm located in Bellingham, Washington. I work in social services right now, and I'm really excited to share a little bit about my chronic pain recovery journey with y'all. The symptoms I was experiencing, my diagnosis was back pain related. I had sciatica symptoms as well as SI joint dysfunction. And so, yeah, I went through physical therapy, went through MRIs, all of the different treatments to understand if there was like a slip disc or anything like that, physical therapy. And ultimately, yeah, I didn't have any symptom or any medical diagnosis that would contribute to the symptoms I was experiencing. Yeah, so my symptom onset was when I was about 22. I'm 29 now for context, and my symptoms started about 6 months after graduating from university. I was working for the Forest Service and doing a lot of seasonal work. So I was moving like every 3 to 6 months. I was moving states, just packing up my little Volvo and finding new jobs and kind of traveling a bit. Um, Sounds really romantic and exciting and adventurous, but it was challenging in that I was very financially unstable, having to find a new job every 3 to 6 months, not really having like a home base was really challenging for me. And so there was a point when I was leaving a wildlife study in California, and I was just like, I need to go home. I grew up in Florida, and so I drove from Florida or from California to Florida with in a tiny Volvo with all my things and just like went home for a little bit. I went on a run on the beach a couple days after getting back, and that was when my symptoms started. Um, in hindsight, I'd been having symptoms prior to that, but they were usually pretty acute and they would go away after a couple of days. But this run on the beach was really the catalyst for debilitating symptoms. After that run, I really struggled um, to walk, to do anything. It just like started progressing, and I started seeing every doctor, physical therapist, chiropractor under the sun, trying to figure out what was happening. And there weren't a lot of answers. So when my symptoms started, I felt a bit lost. I think in college I developed like a lot of anxiety, and I think my way to cope with anxiety was staying on the move, like movement and like sports were really important for me to kind of like as an outlet. Um, and when I started having symptoms, it was really triggered by movement, like any sort of walking, running, climbing, anything was just causing me to be in debilitating pain. So I felt like I was having a sort of like identity crisis, like I didn't know who I was when I had to sit still. And throughout the couple of years where I was experiencing the debilitating symptoms, I just kept pushing. Like there I never really got the picture that I needed to like chill a little bit, and I needed to kind of look inward, and instead I was just pushing, 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 trying to just grit my teeth and bear the pain and symptoms and continue moving forward. But I was, working in forest service work, working in wildlife, so it's a very physically demanding job. And I'd also put a lot of my identity in like the work I was doing. And so, having to work 40 hours a week physically and then having to completely stop. Like I just didn't know who I was. I felt like I was like a shell of who I once was. I didn't know how to manage what was going on inside of me with the reality of my experience. And so, yeah, I really struggled with that. And it was actually like during COVID when we were all forced to take a break when I started doing more reading about the mind body connection. I read Dr. Sarno's book, and his book on back pain really resonated with me. And that was kind of my catalyst to find Curable and start down that path of recovery. Well, in Sarno's book, he talks a lot about like the medical model and how he's very like supportive of finding medical support and like going through kind of all of the processes to understand your symptoms better. So that resonated with me because he was like, no, 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 you should like go to the doctor. You should figure this out and then come back here if you don't. And he had this list of like personality traits that he noticed in his patients that all had chronic pain. And it was this list of like 10 traits, and I was just like going down like check, check, check. Some examples of those were like people pleasing, being very conscientious, being very responsible, perfectionist. These traits that hold that personality traits that are really valued in our society, but they can sometimes turn into the individual suppressing a lot of emotions, not feeling like they can say no to things. And over time, it starts to really impact our health. And he particularly talked a lot about anger. I'm not an angry person, like on the outside, um, but the way he described it was a lot in the context of like people pleasing and how every time we say no or we say yes to something that we really want to say no, it's just kind of like another tick in that well of developing emotion that we're not feeling, that we're just pressing down. And yeah, that really resonated with me, and it taught me a lot about boundaries, and that was something I ended up working on in therapy more. And yeah, so that was kind of like the things from Dr. Sonner's book that resonated with me. So I believe I'm trying to think of the time when I found Curable. So I read Dr. Sarno's book, and then I think in like a pain fog of desperation, I posted anonymously on Reddit. And I was like, I don't know what's wrong with me. Like, here's what I'm experiencing. Here's what I've read. Like, does anybody have experience with this? And somebody linked this TechCrunch article about an individual's wife who was experiencing migraines, and she used the Curable app and had really positive recovery story from it. So I think that's how I found Curable. I listened to probably every single recovery story. I found Nicole Sachs' work through one of the interviews. And I started utilizing some of her journal techniques, which Curable also has some amazing writing prompts and techniques. So it's kind of like a hybrid between those two strategies and techniques. Um, and also the neuroscience education was really important. It's very empowering to know that you have some control over your recovery. Our brains are plastic, and their ability to change and mold and um, do this, change the way they process is really amazing thing. And so the neuroscience education I felt like was really empowering, and just knowing like I have some power in this situation. Like when I was in um, really bad pain, I would just like tell my brain that I was safe in like every movement. Like I would just like stand up and I'd be like, walking is safe, and just kind of like do this heavy labor with every movement. And it worked. Like when I started to feel like less symptoms, it kind of was like this snowball effect of like, wait, hold on, like this is really impactful, and it yeah, it's really meaningful. So I think the first moment I had was it was after a meditation, and I I don't know what it was in the meditation, but something like moved me, and I like cried during the meditation, and I stood up, and my pain was like cut in half. And it's like I just had this like release, and my symptoms, like pain symptom, decreased. And I think that was like a light bulb moment of just like, oh, like here's all these things I've been reading and listening and these recovery stories. And then it finally like clicked for me. And then as I started to recover, I would think a lot about these concepts, and this thing I would repeat to myself or I would use as kind of like a journal prompt was would say like the pain is a signpost for an emotion that I have not felt yet, and an emotion that I'm not feeling or an emotion I'm having is usually a sign that a need isn't being met. And that worked for me, and then it gave me like in my journal prompts some guidance of like, okay, what need isn't being met right now. And as I'm journaling, it's, it starts as like this surface level, this is the thing in my life right now that doesn't feel like it's being met. But then you go deeper and you're like, oh, when was the time as like a kid when I felt like this? And then you go deeper and you start to process kind of these emotions that you didn't, and these experiences that you haven't thought about in 2 decades. So, yeah, so that kind of string of thought was really powerful, for me as well. And as I recovered, I just felt really hopeful. Yeah, and it kind of, yeah, it's kind of like this the positive feedback loop, you do an exercise, you feel a little bit better, you do an exercise, you do feel a little bit better, and then eventually you feel better for a lot of the time. And now you're just having flare-ups once in a while. And I don't know, healing's not linear. I still get flare-ups, but my identity isn't rooted in my pain anymore. It's a part of me and I accept that, but it's not who I am anymore. Whereas for a couple of years, the pain really became my identity. So yeah, it felt good to move into a space where I accept that part of me, but I don't let it define my experience. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Like I think about this almost daily. Like it's like emotional because I didn't think like I would be able to run again or like ski or like I just thought my physical activities in my life were over. And now, over the past, like, I mean, I'm 29 now, so 7 years, I am just in a completely different place. I fit on the physical side of things, like, I signed up for a 25K in August, like my, first 25K trail race, like hoping to be able to run ultras in the future. I am skiing every single weekend, and I surf and go to the gym, and I do all of these things that I was so terrified of doing without fear now. Like I know that my symptoms are a result of, a need not being met and not physical activity, which was really important for me. So that being said, all of that is wonderful. But I would say, in addition, I was working for the Forest Service and I became a teacher, and now I work in social services. And I think just on a high level, getting to know myself through my pain experience, like I'm so grateful because I think what I'm so grateful for the 22-year-old version of myself who was just kind of like, I'll do whatever. It's just like down for whatever. Didn't really have any boundaries. I love her. She was, doing her thing. But now looking at who I am now, I feel like I just have such a strong sense of who I am, and that has led me to apply to graduate school. I'm applying to graduate school right now to become a mental health counselor because I want to work with chronic pain patients. And it's just led me on this whole path of self-discovery, of I don't know, just this quiet sense of self that I really, really like love. And that part was unexpected. Like all the physical stuff, great. But the I think the real like meaningful thing that happened for me was like I genuinely like know myself and I feel connected to myself and my purpose. And yeah, I'm really grateful. I think I think that our coping mechanisms, our pain, the things that keep us really marred down, they have the opportunity to become like our superpowers in a way. Like I look back to when I was a kid and, throughout my early 20s, I was so anxious and conscientious and worried about, you know, very hyper vigilant, very worried about what everybody else needed. And once I recovered from chronic pain, once I started working on these boundaries and these skills, coping skills and therapy, I've watched those traits kind of morph into this like intuitiveness and this like self ability to self reflect that feels it feels like, yeah, it feels like this is my purpose now. Like using those tools, using those skills. Um, yeah, that's I don't know if that makes sense. Like it's like the things that were holding me in pain, keeping me in pain, were holding me back have now become the things that give me purpose. And I think the start of that for me, if I could tell my past self, is like just the acceptance piece, like accepting that you're experiencing pain, accepting that this is part of you, and then, you know, moving on from there. Because I think I denied it for a really long time, just kept gritting my teeth, pushing through. And once I had the relief of just like acceptance, I think that was like a pivotal point for me as well.